So thank you for joining us. Today, I have a really special guest, and it's kind of cool. I'm excited about this. We did our first talk together back in COVID. I don't know if you remember that. It was back in 2020.
I do.
And we had this conversation. So today, on today's episode, I have Mr. Evan Moylan, who is not just an expert that I know, he is a good friend, and so I know he's a good human, and I am so excited to finally be able to get him on here. And we have some really cool conversations sitting in the Frio River sometimes about economic development and nonprofits and how this world collides. And so now I'm getting to bring him on and share his knowledge with all of you guys. He is a partner with GSB Fundraising, a firm that's been helping charitable causes across the country grow through generosity for more than 50 years. So with nearly 3 decades of leadership under his belt, he's worked in nonprofits, corporate boards, and everything in between. He brings wisdom, strategy, and a whole lot of heart. I know this guy, like I said, he's a really good human, and I'm super excited to have him here today. One of the things I love about him is he doesn't necessarily see nonprofits as just something you're supposed to fund. He really sees them as they are economic engines in a community. Employers, they drive events, they can be a community anchor for your community. And today he's going to challenge how we as economic developers really look at nonprofits, especially here in Texas where we have dedicated resources. We seem to be an organization that these other nonprofits come to and look for funding. And it can be a little tiresome and daunting because you want to help, but you're not sure, just sponsoring the 5K, is that really the best use of our money? So today he's going to share how really all nonprofits are not the same. Just because they're a nonprofit, they're not created the same. And so we'll learn how to not stop lumping them all together and really sort of dissect what it is they do, what role do they fill in the community, and really help us identify what they mean to our town. Like each one, what does it mean? What do they bring to our community and our quality of life? He's also going to help us rethink events, like I just mentioned, because just because they've always done an event doesn't mean that event should always be done, and maybe it's time for a shift. Really, it's not just about hosting the event, it's about the time and effort to create that event. If you think about it, like what's the return on investment, not just from money, but from resources. And then talking about resources and really redefining what that means for the nonprofit. A lot of times we think we just write a check and we get our logo on the big sign and that's great, but is that really the best use of our funds, and does it really help the nonprofit in the long run? So I'm super excited to have him here today. If you're joining us, in Texas in the afternoon, maybe you're not drinking coffee, you're having a cold beverage. It's Friday. If you're really lucky, maybe you're watching it from the porch somewhere and really enjoying a cold beverage. But we're glad you're here. Again, I'm Super Dave Quinn, and I'm talking to Mr. Evan Moylan, my good friend. Evan, welcome to the show. Let's dive in, buddy.
Hey, great to see you, Dave, and thanks everybody for giving me some time to be with you. It's great to be with business leaders from all over the country, and especially right here in Texas. So appreciate that, Dave, and good to see you not in your flip-flops in a chair in the river, but here on Zoom. So, as you said, I've been in the nonprofit space for a long time as an executive leader, C-suite leader, and I've led small nonprofits and I've led large nonprofits. And I've been a full-time consultant since 2016 and a partner in GSB Fundraising since the last 3 years or so as our founders retired. Early in my career, I was leading a nonprofit in Arizona. And it was the day I was being hired, and I was in my car and we were driving. I had 2 people of the hiring committee in the back seat and my wife was in the front seat, and I was pulled over for allegedly failing to yield. Now, the person I allegedly failed to yield to was the state trooper. And I don't know if Arizona state troopers are like Texas state troopers. They got the big hats, right? And he comes over in the shadow, the hat falls over my car. And I had spent some time in Vermont and I had Vermont plates on my car. And the trooper leaned over and said, "Son, why don't you have Arizona plates on your car?" And I said, "Well, sir, it's my very first day. I've just taken a new job." Now, my new job was to direct the Lutheran Campus Ministry Center at Arizona State University. But I didn't want to explain that to him, right? And so this was a teeny tiny nonprofit. I was the only staff person. We had an operating budget back then of about $150,000. And he said, "What's the job?" And I said, "Well, I'm the new campus minister at Arizona State University." And he said, "Okay." And he took my license and he grumbled about it being from Vermont too. Then he went back to his cruiser and I sat there trying to fill the awkward space with my bosses, right? And a few moments later, he came back and he leaned in and he handed me my license and he said, "Well, Father, today's your lucky day." And I said, "Thank you, my son." And I took my license and I drove off, right? The world's about perspective. The direction from which we come, the direction to which we go shapes that which we see. From my perspective, just got out of a ticket, right? From his perspective, obviously a good Catholic, no need to go to Mass that Sunday. From the perspective of anybody driving by that morning, he was doing what he's called to do, which is protect and serve our community. Perspective is really, really important. So I want to give you a little bit of my perspective before we dive in. One of the pieces that I bring with me is that I've led little tiny nonprofits like that, and I've led great big giant nonprofits. So my last stop before consulting was in Austin. I was the chief mission officer for an organization called Upbring. Upbring had 30 locations and 1,000 staff across 3 states. We did everything from senior living to foster care work to sheltering children. We had low-income intervention systems. We were a complicated organization. And nonprofits are like that. Nonprofits are all different. So when you look in your community, depending on the shape and size of your community, when you think of nonprofits, you may get a different picture. Now, I live in Bastrop, Texas. The nonprofits I think about, I see their leaders in the HEB, right? I see their leaders out at dinner on a Friday night. I know them personally, and I know them as, but in the bigger nonprofit world, you may be dealing with somebody, who's 20 or 30 rungs down on the list of leadership in the organization. Not every nonprofit's the same. Upbring, we received about 97% of our funding from state and federal contracts. Our fundraising work only did the above and beyond, those things that kids should have that government doesn't pay for. And so our philanthropic friends would do that to help make sure a kid could go to the prom or could play sports or had the educational tools they need, right? But then you look at something like your local food shelf, they may be raising 30, 40% of their budget from local charitable gifts. Or you look at something like a camp and retreat center, they may be in the 40, 50 percentile range. So every nonprofit's different and what they do is different. I was going to give you a test, Dave, but I don't want to do it, publicly here. There are 29 classes of 501(c)s in the IRS code, right? And so every IRS or every nonprofit's different. Most of the ones you're thinking about are a C3, but your chambers are nonprofits, right? Some of your advocacy groups are nonprofits, your lobbying groups, your PACs, all of that nonprofit under a different class in this, and all the rules are different for all of them. And so as we dive in here, I want you to know that. I also want you to know that I'm a business owner and leader, right? So I own 2 small businesses outside of my consulting work. I own my consulting practice. It's a for-profit business. And then I own a small, property company that I do some things with a buddy. And then I'm involved actually in a for-profit vodka company as well as an investor and as a leader in this company. So I, like you, have sat in places where people have come to us for support and seen that. So when we think about nonprofit leaders, what I like to say is I meet the best people in the world when we're doing this work. They're people that want to do good in the world, but usually they're experts in something other than running a business, right? So they're the world's expert in the effects of Jello in radiology, or they're the world's expert in children's services, or in hunger, or in homelessness, or in faith, or something like that. They're an expert in their space, but they didn't know they were going to get up tomorrow and have to do HR. And they didn't know they were going to get up tomorrow and they were going to have to figure out how to do technology and not have, a chief information officer. And they didn't realize that they were going to have to be the person crawling under the building running the Cat5 cable, right? And they didn't know that they were going to have to do all these things. So from the business aspect, especially from those coming from econ development, we have an opportunity to help organizations lift themselves beyond their own capacities, not only through their events and things, but through how we resource them. But the first lesson is don't look at them all the same. What your food shelf needs is different than what your theater needs, right? So here in Bastrop, we have an incredible Bastrop County food pantry run by an incredible leader. She does a great job. And they needed new facilities. We're growing fast. If you haven't heard about Bastrop, and the needs of the community are growing fast. They raised money from community individuals, but they didn't really need all of the money to come from individuals because they have opportunities for grants and for federal funding and things like that, right? At the same time, we've got a Slam Bang Theater in downtown Bastrop. It's awesome, right? It's called the Bastrop Opera House. It's a regional theater doing some of the greatest things in the world. All of their funding comes from ticket sales. There's no federal funding for them, right? There's maybe some historic funding for their building, but they're growing and they're building an arts district in downtown Bastrop. Now, right now, that organization, talking about how things shift, that organization is bringing 200 people a night from Thursday to Sunday into downtown Bastrop. They track 80% of their folks are coming from outside of Bastrop County to come see these shows. That's that's a
That's economic development.
that's economic development, right? That's 160 people coming into the restaurants of downtown Bastrop that are paying for gas, that are paying for food, that are stopping by Buc-ee's, whatever it is that's going on, right? They're doing that in town. If we lift up a resource like that and help them out, well, now we can lift up the community, right? It's more than just putting money into the event. It's theirs. I think we have to look at them as employers. Upring had 1,000 employees. We got to look at the theater as a tourism driver, and we've got to look at people in partnerships. Our charities that support education, right? They build a better community, and your employees want to move to a community with great education. So don't think of it as a one-stop shop, but approach your nonprofits differently each time. That would be key number one for me.
Yeah, I like it. And so, I mean, I think that's where sometimes because a lot of our in economic development shops, especially our audience, they tend to be 1, 2 person shops. And so you get in this trap of it's just easier for me as an organization to say, here's the application, one size fits all. We fund everybody in October and it's all the same. And we don't have the ability or we don't afford ourselves the time to dig in and really sort of map out a game plan or an infrastructure to utilize all of these different resources. Right? If you're thinking all I have is economic development resources for the Bastrop Opera House, for example, you might miss that that's an incredible opportunity for your hotel occupancy tax, right? Like it's not just always your funds, it's maybe you being the quarterback and saying, okay, here's all of the things you do for the community and different resources maybe we can pull together and understand that.
Exactly. And you all usually have relationships across those lines, right? You have government relationships, you have business relationships, and you can help beyond the dollars, be the connector. And in that particular case, they are leaning heavily on hot funds and other things, right, that make a
Right.
difference in their life. But I bet, and I'm willing to bet that a lot of what your membership gets hit up for is events, right? Because every small town, every community, every nonprofit has 1,000 charitable events. And as the community grows, so will the events. You got to think, why does an organization lean on an event, right? Events, stepping into my nonprofit consulting hat for a second, when we look at fundraising in the United States, events are supposed to serve a very specific purpose. They do a couple of things for us. One, they introduce us to new people. And that's for most nonprofits, that what they would call prospecting, right, is really hard. Where do we get new names from? We don't just buy marketing lists or other things. We need a connection to people. And one of the fastest ways to do that is to have Dave Quinn buy a table at my event and bring 8 people with him that I've never met before. And Dave authenticates for those people and fills. So that's one of the things we want events to do. The other thing that we want events to do is we want events to give us a tangible touch point with our constituency, right? A place where we can all feel the emotion, be on the mountaintop together and experience this thing together. But for so many nonprofits, it becomes the central point of their fundraising. And in the real healthy model of fundraising, it's not the central point. It's one of the drivers on the side that help us do the things we want to do. Fancy terms in fundraising like moves management and acquisition and those kinds of things. We want to do those things, and we use the event to do those. But especially in mid-sized, small-sized nonprofits and small-sized towns, when there's just one person running the shop, they don't have the time and the capacity all the time to do all the things, just like you were saying in your small shops, do all the things they need to do. So they lean heavily on this event because they feel like they can kind of get it all done in one time, right? We can change that paradigm for them. We can take away the necessity of the event because for them, the event feels like, gosh, if we don't get it again this year, if we don't do what we did last year, we won't make our budget. Or if we don't exceed, we won't do this. We can take that away by resourcing their tools and their expertise. Bring people into your community to teach this. Bring people into your community, gather your nonprofit leaders and give them the gift of education, right? We can resource these leaders. When you're talking about capacity building grants, one of the ways you can invest is not just invest in the gift of the event, but invest in their capacity. How do we build their tech for them so they can do more with less? Invest in their staffing over a declining period of time. How can we lift a staffing position, bringing employment into our community that will help them do things better in their community? You know, in most communities, that event crowd's the same crowd. I love our events here in Bastrop. I go to most of them. I have a good time with the same people at every one of them. We wear different costumes, right? But we have a good time and we're all doing the same thing. And we all somehow end up on the same back porch every time, you know? But we can get beyond that group. We can get beyond that community. There are 100,000 other people that would be charitable in Bastrop County that aren't going to go to an event. And resourcing them from your side on tech, on community relationships, and on staffing, boy, that'd be a game changer, right?
So, Evan, I love that. You know, a lot of times it feels as if you have that every nonprofit, especially in a small town, has that one big event that is the home run event. And if they don't hit a home run, the year's going to be miserable, right? And so there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of, you know, arm twisting, and there's like, you got to make this happen. And you know, I think what you're describing, I think, would help economic developers who are again just sort of, I can't just write you a check every time and save you, right? I can't save you that way every time just by buying a ticket and showing up. One of the things that we've done for some of our clients is, you know, as an economic development organization, we don't need to go promote ourselves in our local community. It's a small town, everybody knows us. So what we do is leverage that and say, okay, we're going to allow a small business to sit in our spot who wouldn't have been able to buy it, or might not would have invested because they didn't know, and they get it free. We paid for it. They do it, and then it's on the nonprofit to make it good for them. And then next year, maybe that business buys their own, and then I get another business to slide in there. So that's one way we've done that. Another is to draft off our marketing professionals. We have some contracts with marketing, and so we say, okay, look, we'll do this, but we need you to help this nonprofit market this event for us. Maybe it's creating some social graphics and some of that, and it takes some of the lift off of, you know, the nonprofit itself trying to do that themselves. They don't have the money to necessarily market, so they're trying to do it on their own. So we leverage our investment to kind of get the marketing firm to donate some marketing, you know, to the nonprofits as a way to kind of do that. And go ahead.
That's an incredible benefit to nonprofits because, you know, Sandy, who's the executive director of, you know, Toys for Tots in this community, her password list, right? It's got QuickBooks on it. It's got Candide on it. It's got Indeed on it. It's got a lot of things that she's got to figure out how to do. And so, and she's not an expert at any of them, right? But she's plausible in all of them. So you've got to give her that resource, which is great. You know, changing the resource paradigm can be business driving for you too. And here's kind of my third key that I'll lead into. So let's change the resource paradigm. Your nonprofits are typically funded either in contractual funding, right? They're getting paid a fee for a service, most likely by a municipality or a government, right? City, state, federal, or they're getting charitable dollars in some spaces. And those charitable dollars, when we look at the charitable pie and where it comes from, the largest majority of that comes from individuals. Actually, businesses are among the smallest sliver of that pie when we look at it. And we have to break businesses into pieces because some businesses are small businesses where the individual is making a charitable gift, and some businesses are the large business where it's actually the business, if you will, making the gift. In the long run, it's highly driven by individuals. But when we look at their funding, that's where their money's coming from, right? It's contractual or it's charitable in that space. Well, what if we had an earned income venture, right? Sometimes we think of these things as social ventures or earned income ventures, right? Social enterprises. In other words, what if we had a business that was running as a for-profit, making a difference for a nonprofit that was also accomplishing part of the mission for the end of for whatever the mission is of that organization. So I'll give you
Right.
an example. When I was at Upring, we were dreaming. We never. I left before we got off the ground, but we worked a lot in foster care, and we had a lot of kids who were aging out of foster care and were moving into educational spaces or needed some sort of practical education to move into their lifetime. Right. So we were dreaming about an event center. What would it be like to have an event center where we can train people in front of house that can transfer to restaurants? We can train people in back of house that would transfer to catering and kitchens and restaurants. We could train people in marketing. We could train people in reservations. We can train all of these skills and grow those things and at the same time benefit our community and at the same time make a profit that would come in. So, is there a need or a niche in your community that you could partner with a nonprofit who was going? Maybe you're battling homelessness, maybe you're battling unemployment, maybe you're working with your employment office in one of your communities in that way. But you're venturing together, and that business eventually earns a profit, and that profit goes into the nonprofit. Now, people sometimes get a little bit concerned about this and nervous about this, and there are some rules about it, right? In other words, the profit cannot substantially benefit an individual. So you can't tie this to the bonuses of your CEO or your executive director. But if it benefits the mission and if it's mission related, you can do it. But even in a worst case scenario, you spin off a new business that's a for profit business that pays tax, and you still take the revenue and you put it back into the nonprofit. Think about what you could do with that to drive and to incentivize a new business in your community. Maybe it's a rec center, right? Maybe it's a rec center for the kids, and you're teaching people all of those things behind the scenes. Maybe it's a restaurant. We see those a lot in the social venture space. We've got a neighboring town that has this, right? A kind of pay what you can model service, and where people can also work to earn their food. But what would it be like to incentivize that in your community? I mean, could you put 30 jobs up, 40 jobs up, 100 jobs up for a specialized population and help a nonprofit really do something cool? And we're seeing more and more of this. There's a great example out in, I think it's technically in Fulshire, kind of out west of Katy, right? Where they're growing all the poinsettias, that are sold all over Texas every year in that space. They've got a greenhouse and a cafe and other things, and they're helping, developmentally delayed adults and children learn a vocation in that space, right? What would that be like if we used economic dollars in partnership with a business who's coming in or in partnership with a nonprofit to resource the social enterprise world differently? We could really change the game if we did that.
So Evan, I love this topic and I love what you're talking about because I don't like just writing checks because it feels like that's not a sustainable thing, right? Because the leadership changes, council changes, board changes, and it's always a fight, and it just it may not be there. So how do we help while we can? If I'm an economic developer, how do I go to the nonprofits and sort of identify the resource that really could be game changing? I feel like they might not know. Like for them, it would just be easy. I just need the check because I've got the event, I need the check. And that's usually what we bump into. We've been working with one nonprofit in a community, and they just keep coming, and every time they come, we're happy to meet with them. The city wants to help them, but they don't come in with an ask other than we just need money. They don't say really what for. They just say we need X number of dollars. And we keep trying to get them to give us an ask. Like, do you need a new building? Do you need a new we want something that's going to allow them to do just what you're talking about, be able to reinvest, and that's because that's the way my board thinks in that particular community is they kind of come from it of we don't want to just feed you once, we want you to kind of teach you to fish, that little metaphor. So they want to help, but they want to do it in a way that doesn't make you dependent on me being here. And so how can we identify that, or how can we help them as economic developers identify what resource might be a game changer for them, right? Like they might not even be thinking about it, whether maybe we invest in a CRM that all the nonprofits can license or something, and they get a seat at the table with the CRM, and so they're not having to cover that cost or something. I don't know what it is, but how do I, as an economic developer, identify something like that?
Well, I think it takes relationship and trust quotient, right? Everything takes relationship and trust quotient. You've got to know them beyond what they do and beyond their ask, and they've got to know you beyond what you do and beyond your capacity. And that's the first place, is how do we build relationship? But I think we also have to think about the hierarchy of needs, right? That Maslow's hierarchy of needs thing. If someone's starving, I can't teach them to read, right?
Right.
Reading doesn't do the
Yeah.
reading, right? I got to feed them first. I got to clothe them. I got to make sure they feel safe, right? Now we can
Yeah.
talk about reading in that space once those basic needs are there. So if this nonprofit, to abuse the metaphor, is hungry, right? We've got to tier our approach to make sure they're fed first and then help them grow out of that space. Some of it might be strategic planning. Our nonprofit leaders are great. There are great resources. And you want to know how I know that? Watch how many of them get ripped away to for-profit groups, right? Just watch how many executive directors, because they're usually working at lower salaries or usually working in lower places, especially late in their career, they're so good at developing relationships. You see them get pulled into community relation positions with your power company, with your water company, with other
Yeah.
things, right? Because they're great leaders. So those great leaders, they're doing what they can to make this work, and they're working on razor thin margins, and they're dealing with the question of, are we going to be able to pay the staff today, and that sort of thing. So helping them lift beyond that, let's get them into a strategic planning process. You guys do strategic plannings, with communities and other things all the time. Let's get them to think beyond themselves. Let's open that conversation. And if you're wise in that, let's use that strategic planning process to interview the economic development leaders or interview the city leaders, right? And open up those conversations to think about what we can really do together. And the nonprofit, if they're wise, they're also asking, what does the city need, right? What does the community need so that we can do these things together? We do that with nonprofits all over the country, and I'll just tell you my favorite story on this, and then I don't want to abuse the time you're giving me, Dave. But I was in a little community in Littleton, Colorado, and I was working with an organization, and we were doing a strategic plan, and we went and we interviewed the chief of police, right, for the community, and like most leaders, very cautious in how they responded to us to make sure nobody comes to them without an ask. When
Yeah. Yeah.
we just
Got the
want
hand on the wallet.
yeah, we just want to listen to them and hear about what the needs are in the community and get their perspective. Nobody trusts us, right? And we said we're going to take 20 minutes. So at the end of 20 minutes, we said, thank you so much for your time. It's been invaluable. Really, we hadn't heard anything that was new or valuable yet, but we wanted to honor what we said we would do. And we stood up to leave. And the chief said, hang on, sit down. You guys are at the corner of this and this. And we said, yeah. And he said, we have all the codes to your doors in that space. That neighborhood, they've been asking for increased police presence because they've had some incidents, but it's so far on the other side of the city. Our officers have nowhere to take a break over there, nowhere to use the bathroom or anything like that. What would it be like? Could we maybe set up something where we can use your parking lot and have access to your buildings and your bathrooms? And that organization said, absolutely. We'll set up a special door for you. They put a little coffee station and snack station inside the door, right next to the bathrooms. Clean, safe restroom for an officer to come in. Police park there now every evening in the neighborhood. Crime rates have gone down. Neighbors are thrilled. Nonprofit is thrilled because they have a relationship with the PD. That all started with a conversation, and the conversation started out of a process, right? Build these processes in with your nonprofits and help them grow, because they don't have time. They're just trying to breathe.
Yeah. No, I love that, Evan. Thank you so much. That's just valuable. I hope our audience has enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. I know it's been lightning fast, which is what it's supposed to be. And I really enjoy being able to bring you in with your perspective as you talk about the importance of that. You having a foot in both worlds with the nonprofit and the business owner, and having served on the chamber and being a community leader, you really get a holistic view of what we're trying to do and how you might can help. And so for the folks who might want to reach out to you, maybe bring it in, do some strategic planning for their nonprofit world, or maybe even just chat with you about how you could help identify some of those resources or help them brainstorm on this. Where do people reach out to you? How can they get a hold of you and talk to you about maybe coming into their community?
Yeah, I would love to. My web address is right here with my name in the video, gsbfundraising.com. GSB were the initials of our founders who are no longer with us, but I like to say it stands for Get Some Bucks, you know? So
I
GSB
love it.
Fundraising. And you can find me on there. And by the way, we're a national firm. We're distributed. I have partners and associates all over the country, in every corner of this country. And we're good with working all the different climates and cultures of our amazing country. So glad to do that. And I love to travel and love to get out of the Texas heat in the summertime. So don't be afraid to call me if you're up in
I
Minnesota
I
or
can I
Wisconsin.
can vouch for Evan's propensity to travel to far-flung areas of our country, in places where it might be him and a couple of bison or something, and out on the road. I have firsthand knowledge of such things, and he really does. When he says he works in any markets, he really truly does. So, hey guys, thanks for joining us again. This is Super Dave Quinn, Day One Experts. This has been success from day one. We appreciate you being here. And again, it's love to do this. It is my most favorite part of being a consultant, is just hanging out with cool people, talking about ideas that helps local economic developers do what they do better. And so we thank you for joining us. And until next month, hey, go make it a great day. Bye, guys. Thank y'all. Thanks again, Evan.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your help, Jake.
Cause you gave us a shot, so we'll give you all we got. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back.